Welcome to the Michelle Meow Show, coming to you from the Commonwealth Club of California. I'm John Zipper. I'm the Commonwealth Club's Vice President of Media and Editorial and your co-host for today's program. This is just the latest in more than 175 online programs the club has put on, most of them free, since the pandemic hit. You can find all of our upcoming and our past programs in audio and video if you go to commonwealthclub.org. You can also, of course, find out ways that you can help support the production of our programs. Now, if you are watching us on YouTube, there is a chat box right there next to the video screen or right below it. Feel free to type in some questions for our guest today, and we will work those into our discussion. And if you are planning on ever coming to San Francisco in the future when we are open up again and the world is actually meeting face-to-face, please stop in and enjoy a program live in person. We look forward to seeing you when this is all over. So now I'd like to introduce Michelle Meow, the the producer and host of the Michelle Meow Show and a member of the Commonwealth Club's Board of Governors. Michelle, good to see you again.
Awesome. Thank you so much, John. And yes, I am a co-host. I'm your co-host. You're my co-host.
It's your name on the show, though. So.
I got to add the Michelle Meow Show with John Zipper. Then it'll make sense. Thank you so much for joining us. The first executive order, I think it was probably one of the first 3 executive orders that the president signed when he took office back in 2017 was Executive Order 13767, or the Border Security Immigration Enforcement Improvements Order. What was that order? That order was a plan to build a wall along Mexico and the United States, a 450-mile-long wall that the president had made a promise during his campaign to do. And so as of July of this year, half of that wall has been built, and there is a goal to finish that wall by the end of his first term. Well, I bring that up because while that was the first of many executive orders that the president has signed, it would be the first of many immigration-involved orders and policy changes that the president and his administration continue to make. Immigration continues to be a hot-button issue till this day, even during a pandemic. And so we'll discuss those policy changes. Very excited to introduce to you our guest today. Since 2007, she has given a whole lot of her time to the community. She's dedicated her time to volunteer at several local nonprofit organizations such as the American Bar Association Immigration Justice Project, the San Diego Volunteer Lawyers Program, Legal Aid Society of San Diego, Alliance San Diego, Veterans Pro Bono Program, and all with the goal of helping the unmet needs of the underserved community in the local San Diego area. She's got her own local practice there, and also one of the first Thai-born lawyers to be nominated and selected to receive a couple awards, the Judge Judith Keep Award and the Outstanding Community Service Award, which are very prestigious and rarely presented. Now, I came across her social media videos on Facebook and YouTube, which has garnered an impressive 20 to 30,000 views per videos as she informs and educates the immigrant community about immigration policies here in the United States. And so let's welcome Tammy Sumonta here on the Michelle Meow Show. Tammy, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you for inviting. Hello, sawadee ka.
Sawadee ka, that's right, yes. So before we get into all the changes and the hard conversations, let's get to know you a little bit better. You know, how did San Diego become home, and why law? Why immigration?
So my background is, of course, in law. You know, I graduated with a bachelor degree of law from Thammasat University, one of actually the oldest law school in Thailand. And after I worked in Thailand for a couple of years, I came here to continue my study. And San Diego happens to be the city that, you know, I was living in Thailand, and based on the news and the information that available very little back then in 1999, it still shows that San Diego is still the best weather in America. So we chose that because I came from the capital city, Bangkok. So we have the most polluted city. We are the most polluted city in the world, one of them. And so I chose San Diego. Little do I know that San Diego actually is next to, not far from the border from Mexico. And my main focus has always been in law. I wanted to, when I first studied law, I did not know much about immigration. And through the years of my life here in the US, I first came here as a student. As a law student, I went through all the process of the hiring and firing and rehiring and refiring. I went through the year 2001, the 9/11, year 2008, where the recession happened. So from my experience, I knew how important it is for at least one particular Thai people like me, how important it is for immigration law. So I wanted to, and of course, during my volunteership, I also learned how important it is to have proper paper authorization to be able to open so many doors for you, including the job and the benefits that you can actually live your life and establish your life in the US.
So we're going to get into obviously some specific immigration issues, but just before we do, what's it like and how are you performing your job now in this time of sheltering at home? Are you going into court, or how are sessions being held? How are you communicating with judges? And how also a part of that is, how are your clients dealing with this? Is their stress level higher just because of everything that's going on?
Yeah, it has been a challenge. Since I would say since the 13th of March, we just gone completely telework. I told all my staff to you work from home now because of the pandemic. I do not want to risk anyone's life or health. Our office is in the high-rise building in the heart of downtown San Diego. So we have like 20, 30 floor of, in the building. So I don't want to risk anyone's health on that. So we had gone telework since March, and for court, for cases in court, we will discuss more about that. I already prepared to talk about that. Right now, court, some of them, most of them, I should say, they're already fully open. Some of them open in some area, but we'll discuss more about that. It's a little bit challenge in operating, but after a few months, we already get used to it.
All right, let's get to it. Let's start with DACA, Deferred Action for Childhood Arrivals, and this basically is a program for individuals who are brought to the country at a very young age. And so, good news, in June, the Supreme Court had ruled that the president could not terminate DACA, impacting a lot of people, a lot of individuals. And so let's talk about, DACA, where we're at now. Since the president cannot terminate the program, are we in the clear? What is the status of the program?
So DACA, I think a lot of people already know what it is. DACA basically is just the Deferred Action of Childhood Arrival. So that is the full name of it. It's a mouthful, so people say just DACA. DACA basically just another name that they call it is just Dreamers. Basically refer to a lot of young people who just came here when they were young and they did not have any capability to make any decision on her own, came here because the parents, either the mom or the dad or even some aunts or uncle, took them from their home and then came to the US for a long time. And then after they reached the age of capability, 18, and they could not make any decision and they do not want to go home anymore. Home is here. That, according to them, home is the US where they grew up. Some of them, they came here since they were 2 or 3 years old. So this is all that they know. And 2012, in June 2012, is when President Obama created this program. And under DACA, certain young arrivals who do not have any criminal convictions, not even one. If you strike one, you're out. Not even one will be able to apply for DACA. So now DACA is a program that give you there's so many mistakes that don't understand DACA. And when the DACA program came out, a lot of people protest that because they did not know much about DACA. So now when they know more about DACA, what do they give, what don't they give? So now people kind of like lower the protest down a little bit. So DACA give them opportunity to work legally. So they basically give them authorization or work card, the work permit, so they can work. And the duration of DACA is every 2 years. So that means every 2 years you gotta have to be rechecked. Just make sure that you're not going to be getting yourself in trouble. Every 2 years it will expire. You have to apply for a new DACA protection and a new work permit. Now, the fight that just happened, it was because there's so many people that don't, as we know, that they are pro-immigrant and anti-immigrant. So there are always two sides of the story. And for the lawsuit that happens, it just happened that the last one, the most recent one that happened, the Supreme Court said that, well, now you should, USCIS, Department of Homeland Security, you need to accept DACA applicant. And a few days after Supreme Court decision came out, USCIS announced on their website saying that, well, the court order, we're not going to comply with that. So right now, at the current state of play that we have is that the new initial DACA applications will not be accepted. It will be rejected by Department of State. They also reduced the 2 years, reduce it to 1 year. So, and another important thing is that they will reject the application for advanced parole, meaning that they do not let you go out and come back unless you really have emergency situations.
Wow. Wow. Go ahead, John.
Well, so by reducing it from 2 years to 1 year, it would seem to me a government that is trying so hard to, downsize and streamline things, they've doubled the amount of work, obviously, that they're going to have to do in paperwork and recording and all that kind of stuff. Did they give an explanation for why that decision was made, or was it just an added hurdle to make it more difficult to deter people?
I wish that they would give explanation on every single action that they do, but no, in this situation, no, they did not. And actually, I think by reducing it to 1 year, well, actually, with the furlough, with the delay in working, actually the delay will the reducing of the time will pile up more work on them, in my opinion, because they already back up on their work. Most of the applications right now is 8 months, 10 months, 12 months. So that's already a year. And now reducing it to a year, meaning that the DACA applicant could and might go into no paperwork, no protection for almost a year, waiting for their decision. So now that point is still unclear on what are they going to do. What are they going to do? Are you going to send out a receipt notice and saying that your protection is extended? There's no clear statement on that at this point.
I would think a big worry would be if I've filed this thing and I'm waiting, but my previous work authorization has expired. Does I assume I cannot work then until I get the new one. If I do, does that then become the criminal act that then the government can use to get rid of me?
So this question is a great question. It actually ties up to one of the topics that we are going to talk about, as far as I understand. And most of the employer, especially the big one, the tech company and the big employers, they participated in what is called an I-9 program. And an I-9 program, everyone who register on that, the employer, they need to re-verify. They need to verify the immigration status and the authorization to work, eligibility to work of the employee. So it affects a lot on employer who register in the I-9 program, an employee who works with the I-9 registered employer, or even with the employer who did not register in the I-9 program, but they do have policy on re-verify the status, immigration status, and capability to work of the employee. And we just had a lawsuit, and I think we will discuss this in a little bit later.
I was just going to ask if there are efforts, we know that some of the immigration changes that the administration has tried to make, some of it has been held up, in court proceedings and lawsuits, and if there would be a response to Homeland Security not necessarily complying to the Supreme Court's ruling. I'm processing that if that is possible. I guess it is, because that it's happening. If you're joining us live and you have a question for Tammy, please send them in and we'll try to get them to Tammy. We want you engaged. We want you to ask the questions. This is a great time to do that if you've got questions about immigration. So Tammy, what do you think? Should we move? Well, that was the question. If you know of any effort to respond to the Homeland Security's non-compliance to the Supreme Court's ruling on DACA.
This is very interesting, and a lot of attorneys are very upset about the response that. First of all, the response that we saw when they announced about not complying with the Supreme Court decision on DACA, that is the first thing that kind of upsetting the community. A lot of my colleagues, they're furious about that. And obviously that is not complying with the APA law, the Administrative Procedure Act, that specifically saying that you need to comply with that. But obviously that's not what's happening in USCIS world, and this is how they are going to conduct what their business, the procedure that they announced it. And that is why when you don't comply with the court order, and the person who got affected the most are the applicants, are the people who actually obeying the law and look up to the legal system. They look up to this system to make it work, because we play by the rule, we comply with everything. But then now this happened, it's such a nightmare to everyone.
Well, where do you want to go after this? Because I know we brought up a couple questions that kind of are leading up to the different topics that we were going to discuss. Do you want to go with the president's temporary suspensions of work visas, or do you want to? Because the other side of even DACA, what I'm thinking is this annual renewal. What happens if you're caught in the system? Are they enforcing, deportation proceedings or ICE enforcement during, COVID-19? Those are a couple questions that we were going to talk about. So what do you think? Where should we go next?
Well, why don't we talk about public charge? Because
Got it.
Even though you might be very well eligible to apply for DACA, and someday in the future, if you want to adjust your status, you still have another hurdle, which is a public charge. And, under this realm, there's still good things and bad things that happen in here. So the public charge, let's start by talking about the history. Public charge, before 2019, that this idea was introduced. The concept of public charge is in a guideline. It's not really a rule, it's in a guideline. Since 1999. So you can see how old the guideline is. It was to say, officer, this is your guideline. When you have an application for green card, that is the adjustment of status. This is your guideline. This is what you need to do. And the guideline carried out in the form of the I-864, one of the applications that they need to fill out and say that this is how much money I made last year under that I report to the IRS. This is how much I make, and I make enough to sponsor another person. So let's say I make enough to sponsor my wife. I say I made enough to sponsor my husband, my mom, my dad, my daughter. And because I made enough money, this person is not going to depend on public benefits. They are not going to apply for any public benefit that is federally funded. So that is the old rule in 1999. Now, since 1999, people immigrating into the U.S. and there's so many immigrants who applying for public benefits, and they're starting to see the highly increase of that. So the government was thinking, well, we probably need to do something about that. That's why they have this concept, this new rule came out. And the new public charge rule that came out, it was back in 2018, October 2018, that the government trying to say, well, just to let you know, by the way, we are going to have this public charge came out next year, which is 2019. So in 2019, in August, they made a statement officially saying that, well, we are going to implement the public charge rule in October. However, before it happened, during that time, everyone was so worried because there's so many people in this country that depend on so many benefits. For example, Section 8, for example, Medicare, Medi-Cal, or for disabled people, they depend on so many things. So food stamp is one of the highly ranked benefits that a lot of people depend on. So there are so many concerns about that. And that is what the media call the wealth test. But we would like to call it a public charge. And in October 2019, before the implementation of this, actually the court made a decision to put a temporary injunction to the enforcement of this rule. So basically the court saying that this is a very important matter. We need to thoroughly discuss this and consider this matter. Let's put a pause on that. Don't enforce it yet. Let me decide on this. So to put a pause on that give another 3 months until January of 2020. That is when the court came out and the decision came out and said that, okay, we give you a green light. You can go ahead and enforce the public charge rule. So after that came out, we have the new form that a lot of people already fill out. This is the I-944. This is the public charge application, basically just to tell them what I have been applying, what I have been using, or what I applied, or even I never used it in the past. They basically want to get past information about your public charge, your public benefit receiving. However, that happened in January, right? And then everyone needs to comply with that until COVID came in 2020 of March. So when March came and COVID came with that, the Department of Human Services announced first before the president announced that, well, there's a health concern at large, and we announced the emergency for healthy concern. But a few weeks later after that, in March as well, on the 16th, is when the president say, well, this is a national emergency. We have COVID now. Now, because of COVID and the spread, it's just, everyone knows about this, the spread is just immensely happened. So there's so many concerns that immigrants who got infected or be exposed to the person who already got infected, they were unsure if they got infected. They don't know, and they don't want to go to get tested because they're so afraid of being arrested or being seen as accepting public benefit. So they held themselves, and by doing that, if they are infected, if they're actually positive, they could spread the virus. So that is why there's so many lawsuits. There is a lawsuit that filed, and there are, if you remember the time that it was first spreading, it was in New York. So that is why the state of New York and the city of New York was one of the few plaintiffs who asked for this injunction, asked for the court to put an injunction on public charge. And after they filed this lawsuit, the court gave out the decision, put an order, a preliminary injunction order not to enforce the public charge because of the concerns about infection of COVID. They want people who are unsure if they might get COVID. They want them to get tested, or even if you already got COVID, they want them to get treated to make sure that your life is more important than your concern about being seen as receiving public benefits. And the court decision came out in July of 2020, this past few months. After that, a few days later, this is in contrast to DACA. A few days later, USCIS announced on its own website that, okay, it's complying with the court decision, and they are not going to request that the applicant for green card, that they're not requiring to submit the I-944 form, which is the form that give out the information about public benefits that they received. However, we thought that was the end. Yesterday, in August 12th, the court has another decision saying that, well, even though that injunction is nationwide, we are making an exception on 3 states, which is New York, Vermont, and Connecticut. So New York, Vermont, and Connecticut, which is under the Second Circuit, these 3 states, when you apply for your green card, when you apply for your adjustment of status, residents under these 3 states, you need to submit the application, the I-944 application, which is the information that you ever received, or will you ever be receiving, will you ever be likely to receive public benefits from the government. So that's basically the current state of play, is that we do not have a nationwide injunction. Except for this, we don't have a nationwide injunction because there are these 3 states that's still enforcing this rule.
And Tammy, you mentioned that the injunction that is in place for the rest of the country, did you say it was a temporary injunction? Is there a time limit on it, or what's the trigger for the next determination of it?
That's a good question. Thank you. So the court decision that came out, the injunction is tied to the COVID, right? Because the concern was the COVID. So the court decision is conditioned upon COVID outbreak. So we still need to see that, well, if the COVID outbreak already dispersed, there's no more outbreak, we can get it under control, then the injunction could just be gone. Now, another thing that I want to add is that, the 1999 guideline, just when I mentioned earlier that they want to make sure that you are able to sponsor the person, but this new public charge, they basically add a burden to the applicant itself. So the 1999 guideline, they add the burden to the sponsor, to the petitioner. I want to apply for my spouse, so they add the burden on you. But the new public charge rule, they add the burden on the applicant. So you want a green card, show me you're not going to be a public charge.
And my apologies, I'm still confused as to why we don't have a nationwide injunction and why the 3 states are excluded from the injunction. I mean, what's the justification behind that? How can the court rule in this way?
So I would guess that it was because of the spread. So the spread, as we can see, I'm sorry. So the spread, as we can see that in New York, they already got it under control. And we can say it under control because the spread is not as much as it used to be.
Interesting.
Now, so is that ruling under the Second Circuit Court, is that being appealed to the Supreme Court, or is it a done deal, at least in those 3 states?
At this point, it is a done deal. It could be any changes in the future, but this is the most recent. It just happened yesterday.
Okay, very interesting.
And one clarifying question around public charges, this wealth test. It's just ridiculous, the wealth test. You have to be wealthy enough to, live in this great country. Who does it apply to? We talked about, for example, Dreamers having to now renew annually. Does it apply to new people who want to adjust their status as permanent residents, or if you're already in queue and you're already in the process, does it also still apply to you? Who does it actually apply to?
So yes, it's a good question because so many people are unclear about this unless they are in immigration field. It applies to everyone who wants to apply for a green card. Basically, if you want a green card, you need to show that. If you already have a green card, they will not see you under the public charge rule. There's another rule that called a deportation based on the public charge. So this new rule that came out in February 2020, it basically puts another determination on the USCIS officer that they need to look at the applicant. If they are going to the green card holder who wants to apply for naturalization, if that person has ever received public benefit during a certain period of time, then they need to look into that. So those are the only two situations that it applies to.
This is another interesting question about this, though. As far as like government assistance and benefits, I mean, it's a pandemic, it's COVID-19 times. A lot of people are applying for unemployment. There aren't a lot of resources for undocumented folks. People are looking to receive some kind of help, such as stimulus. What falls under public benefits? And if you automatically get a stimulus check from the government, does that mean that you are taking money from the government? Is that a benefit?
Okay, so this question sounds like it's simple, but it opens a lot of doors to discussion. and when you're talking about unemployment benefit and you're talking about stimulus check, it gets into the area of employment law. Okay, so the most important thing that you need to remember is that when you are a non-citizen and non-green card holder, you actually cannot work unless you have an authorization to work. So an authorization to work can come in different forms. Can be a visa that you can work under a work visa, or you can work because you have an authorization card to work here. And the authorization card is basically people know it as work permit. Work permit, you can get it if you're an applicant for asylum, or you're an applicant for a U visa for certain types, or even some students after they graduate and go into under the OPT program, they can get that too. So now the question comes here that COVID came and the person cannot work. Now, can they receive unemployment benefit? If they receive unemployment benefit because they are eligible to work, then there's no problem. But now if they're not eligible to work and then they're receiving public benefit, they're receiving unemployment benefit, that could affect you in the future. However, USCIS announced it on their website that unemployment will not be considered a public benefit. Okay, and the reason is because unemployment is what you paid into your own account, right? And then you receive it. However, if you're not the person who paid into the account and then you apply, then you tap into someone else's money, right?
This is why there are immigration lawyers to try to figure all this stuff out. You mentioned that originally there were these guidelines stretching back to 1999 that they've kind of been applying. But I've also heard the words used that have you ever received any public benefits? So which leads me to kind of wondering about retroactive changes in the future where they might reinterpret whether it's unemployment or something else. Have they done that kind of thing over the past 21 years, or have they basically stayed in agreement on the category of what is and is not considered a public assistance?
A good question. So the 1999 guideline, the name is the guideline. So it's not a set rule. The guideline gives a very broad discretionary decision that USCIS officer or adjudicating officer who reviewing your application, they can make a determination on the certain facts of the applicant in front of them. So that is one thing that even though it's a guideline and they can make a decision if they see fit in the decision, in the fact that certain fact that they have. As like I explained earlier, the 1999 puts a burden on the applicant. On the petitioner. I want to apply for them, so they put a petition on you. Well, you want to bring them in, show me, right? So now, because of the new rule, now they put the burden on the other person. You want to come in, show me.
Well, we have a few more topics to cover, and I can't believe we're already halfway through the program. If you're just joining us live, you want to ask Tammy a question about immigration, please do, and we'll try to get them to her, although we have a lot of our own questions too. I think that's a good segue, to talk about the fact that USCIS is facing a $1.2 billion deficit, and if Congress doesn't act, they're looking to furlough up to 13,000 workers out of, maybe 20,000 or so, which would really leave very little people to now have to handle these new policy changes. It seems like, extra increased workload steps for adjudicators and immigration officers. Let's talk about that. I mean, what will be the impact? It seems it would be drastic if 13,000 people are furloughed who handled, immigration cases in the United States.
So by getting into that, you need to understand that USCIS is an agency that is self-generated income, meaning that they would normally receive their own revenue. They have their own revenue from applications. And so now it depends if there's a lot of applications, then they would make a lot of money, right? And now during COVID, of course, economy is bad. People save money. They obviously decreasing in the application fees that they receive. And that's why it impacts on their revenue. And from the announcement that they made, they would be, if they don't receive the 1.2 billion funding from the federal government to help them, they would be following 13,400 people. And the 13,400 people here, the positions that they have is all across the country. So every single office will be affected. Now, back in July of 2020, this last month, we had the Immigration Association Lawyer in America, or AILA. We have a conference, and at the conference, USCIS already admitted that they are already delayed in doing everything, delayed in sending out receipt notice, delayed in sending out cards and work permit, like I said, or a green card. They are delaying doing everything. Now, if they are following a lot of people, imagine how much more delay we would get in everything. And that is why it ties to when we talk about 1 year, reducing it to 1 year. Now it's going to be all impacting all across the board. So I can imagine this. And since we're on this topic, I want to talk about the most recent news that just came out on August the 3rd, that the court had made a decision on this, made an injunction to USCIS that USCIS need to produce the work permit card and the green card to those who already received an approval notice but had not received the physical card itself. So usually USCIS would contract with a third-party company, that this third-party company would produce the card. USCIS will make a review the case, will make an adjudication. They'll say, well, I approve this case, send it to the third company.
It looks like we might have lost. Are you back? We're having some.
Here we go.
Tammy, we lost you for a
Welcome back.
moment, but please continue.
Right. Oh, okay. So the third-party company, after they receive the notice on the notification from USCIS, they will make a card according to the information that they received. And usually that happens within 48 hours. Mm-hmm. Now in June, because of the budget shortfall, they do not renew the contract with this third company. And they said, well, it's okay. I'm just going to do it myself. So now you can imagine they already delayed, they already have a lot of work, and now they are very behind in producing the card. So there is a lawsuit that filed by this lady. She is an Indian national who came in here under an H-1B visa, which is a work visa. And later she married her husband, who also had a work visa. So she changed her status into the dependent of that person, which is an H4. And under an H4 category, she is eligible to apply for a work permit. And that's what she did. Her lawyer did that for her, helped her until this most recent one that she did not receive her card, her work permit card. And it has been more than 100 days that she has been waiting. So in her case, which is the same thing that we discussed before, that in her case, she could not provide proof to her employer that she is eligible to work, she has authorization to work. So her employer said that, well, if you cannot show me your proof that you are authorized to work, I'm going to terminate you. So you can see how much this impact not just one person, but it impacts the whole community, the nation, the economy of the nation too. So she cannot work. She would not be able to work without the card, right? So after the lawyer tried everything, contact USCIS several times, contact the congressman office to ask them for help. They intervened and they still did not get anything moving forward. USCIS still said, well, we are unable to expedite your production of your card. So after they try everything, they exhausted all the options. There's no other way. So the lawyer had to file a lawsuit. And as soon as the lawyer filed a lawsuit, USCIS magically were able to produce the card for the person. And she received the card. Oh, she's happy, and then USCIS trying to say that, well, we asked the court to dismiss the case because the case is already moot. Moot is a legal term saying that it's already too late. You don't have a damage anymore, basically. But what USCIS already forgot is that there are about 75,000 people that waiting for the physical EAD card, the work permit, to be produced and sent it to them. There are also about 50,000 people that waiting for the physical green card to be produced and sent it to them because they already received the approval notice. USCIS already adjudicated the case, already told them, we are okay with your application. You are approved. Your application is approved. They already told them. Now, please wait for the card. And then they've been waiting, never receive anything. So that is why this is a class action. So the court had made a decision saying that, well, within 7 days from the 3rd of August, now USCIS, you have to produce the card, basically, do what you're supposed to do within 48 hours, supposed to do as if you still had that company. So produce the card, send it to the applicant who already received the approval notice.
Wow.
So that is the most current state of play.
That sounds like
on this
a
one.
crisis.
Well, it's interesting what you mentioned, Tammy, that USCIS is supposed to be a self-funding agency, but now they'll be on public support. Well, on a serious level, though, was, as you touched on also, the switch over from a 2-year DACA work authorization to 1 year. So the applicant then, I assume, is paying twice as much in application fees because they're doing it twice as often. Is that correct?
Oh, that's interesting point of view. Yes, instead of 2 years, now you're getting 1 year, and then with the same fee. Now we do have a fee increase as well that it will take effect on the 2nd of October this year, and DACA. I believe DACA we have a very minimal increase. But one thing that I want to add about the delaying in working of USCIS is that the delay is everything across the board on all applications. So application for green card, application for naturalization, which is very important. So you can see that the impact on this one, it impacts on the economy side because people cannot work. It impacts on the living the living expense, the living in everyday living matter of the people because they cannot work, they could lose their job, and also impact on the national side as far as becoming a U.S. citizen because now they delay on reviewing all the application, including naturalization. So instead of having basically 5,000 more people to be able to vote, now they cannot vote because they could not pass the application process, could not move forward.
Another form of voter suppression, my opinion, not Tammy's. Again, like I said, or I kind of mentioned under my breath earlier, but this sounds like a crisis. And actually, public health directors and officials, when we start adding it up between public charge or the wealth tests and DACA and all these changes that you're talking about, the very big worry we're already experiencing a pandemic is a public health crisis. That leads us, to the next discussion I want to make sure that we have time for, which is during COVID-19 times, the president had mentioned that he would suspend immigrants who coming over with work visas such as H-1B, J visa, L visa, and that was to protect the American economy, since over 20 million people have applied for unemployment here in the country, and kind of keep jobs for Americans or people who are living in America to Americans. And I think that was like a 60-day suspension, but it's unclear where we stand today, how people are affected and impacted. You gave a great example of somebody, with a work visa, but let's talk about that temporary suspension. Where are we at today with that?
So before we understand where we are now, we have to look in the past. That is one of my main always explanation. You want to understand today, you got to look in the past. And when we look in the past, we can see that since January of 2020, there are many executive orders and so many people lose track of that because there's so many that came out since January of 2020. And the first one that came out, it was because of the COVID as well. The first one that came out was in January of 2020. And this is the first travel ban, and the ban is on Chinese citizen that came in, that would come into the country. They would just basically ban that. There's no expiration of that, so they leave it out. So we're banning them. And the second one that just came out, it was in February. So basically, we have executive order almost every month that came out right now. In February, they add Iran to the list of country of people who came from those countries. They will be banned, not to coming in. And then in March, they add the UK, in England, and Schengen country. Everyone in the Schengen country, England and Ireland, will be banned from coming in. And then after the pandemic happened, after COVID, on the 22nd, remember that the president said he declared national emergency on the 16th of March. On the 22nd, he signed an executive order telling the Department of State, basically the consulate from other country abroad, saying that, well, stop working because of the health concern. We want to be safe. We want you to be safe. The safety of your of the employee and the people who would come into the office. So stop working. So since March of 22nd of March, all the consulate offices, they closed to in-person, to routine service. And then the next month in April, there's another proclamation that came out that suspend entry of everyone who pose risk of U.S. market labor. So here is the one that would be protecting the economy of the U.S. They on the face, however, this proclamation is not really making the news that much because of the proclamation itself. On the face, when you read it, it sounds very severe. But when you read it into the content, there are so many exceptions to this proclamation. So many of my friends will say this is toothless. This is there's no impact that much on immigration. And then the next month in May, they have another suspension of entry, which is another ban that added Brazil. If we remember, Brazil is highly infected, right? And second on top of the chart of the world infection. So in May, the president added Brazil to that. Now, important thing is that the executive order, the proclamation that came out, the most important one is the one that came out in June of 22nd, which is the one that Michelle just mentioned. This one made the news because it impacts a lot of foreign workers. So under this proclamation, there are 4 types of visa that visa holders that got impacted by this. The first one is H-1B, H-1B visa, H-2B visa, a J visa, and an L visa. So those 4 categories are the visa holders that got impacted by this proclamation. Under this proclamation, this is my opinion based on my research, we can see that about 65% of immigrants in the US, 65% are these people who are foreign workers. And we have, but if you compare between family-based petition immigration or business-based immigration, the business-based is a lot less than family. So this is about 35% of work visa that got impacted by this proclamation. And this proclamation, even though they put a suspension on these people, there are so many exceptions as well. For example, you would be able to come in if you could show that you are part or involvement or you are engaged in your employment has the impact on national security or the food supply chain. Basically, if you're working in a restaurant or in the food supply chain, you will be able to show that, and then you will be able to come in. J1, the J visa, if you are in scholar or in medical, in healthcare system, you would be able to come in. However, this ban is set to expire at the end of the year, December 31st of 2020. So we can see, and now it ties to the delay in the process, right? So basically, if you are in the line of receiving the visa, you're not holding the visa and you're outside the country, you're probably not going to be affected by this proclamation because of the delay in processing of the application and because of the proclamation in March that say consulate closed office, right? So you have to understand it is all tied together. And then in July of 2029, there also, this is a public charge injunction. Another important one that came out, it was in August this year on the 3rd, that came out that aligning federal contracting, that basically this one is not really called for an active action, but they call for passive action. That's how I see it, that the executive order tells the federal government that when you hire a contractor, you should look at their experience and not the diploma, not the degree. And they leave the determination up to the Department of Labor to make a report to the president, so that you need to send the report to the president based on your determination. What do you think of such contractors? Do we need them? Are their experiences would be beneficial to the country, to the nation? And then yesterday as well, there's so many things happened yesterday. Yesterday, on the 12th of August, we also have a notification that came out from the Department of State. Now, when we talk about Department of State, we talk about the work that happened outside of the country, the work that happened at the consulate. Okay, so there is a notification, an update that came out from the Department of State that although you may be banned by the proclamation on your H1B, on your L1, here are some exceptions, and they have very broad exception here. For example, if you can get a visa stamp. So that's basically you can get a visa stamp, and you should be able to come into country if you can show that you continue to work for the same employee, the same position, in the same capacity, under the same employee, same position, and same work duties that you have. And your work is very critical in the infrastructure sector, and your wage is making you meet the minimum wage, the prevailing wage in the immigration world. And there will be a financial hardship on the employer if you could not come in here. So if you can show so many exceptions, they add so many exceptions into that. And you need to meet at least 2 out of 5 criteria that the exception that they listed out. If you can meet that, you can show that you are exempted, and then you can get a visa stamp and then come in here before the 31st of December of this year. So that is the most current state of play for the foreign nation. Another
Sure.
important, I'm sorry, Michelle.
No, it's okay.
The important thing that I want to point out is that the proclamation and all the entry ban, it does not include asylum applications. Okay, so asylum applicants, they can apply, they can still apply. The travel ban does not impact them.
But I assume that even those applications are still going to face this slowdown of work just by the nature of USCIS being underpersoned. As one of our viewers noted on YouTube, it's just, this really is a crisis, but it's like crisis on top of crisis. There was one thing just dealing with the DACA issue, and then there was, these other rules that were shifting, and then COVID came along, and then there's the funding and economic issues that have come around. A very scary time, I would think, for a lot of people trying to work through this.
Yeah,
You're right.
Yeah. As we're winding down on time, Tammy, I think that, just to add on to John's thoughts and our viewer for sending that in, we're in this crisis, and there seems to be extreme delays that are upending, human people's lives. You as the attorney, I can't even imagine what stress level you're at and what workload is for you, and kind of what are your thoughts on path forward, or what needs to happen? We know what needs to happen. Something needs to happen. People need to be working, and applications need to be processed. But it just sounds like we're in this crisis, this stalling, at least until the end of the year.
Yes. One thing that I always keep telling my clients is that you need to be on top of the changes, which is very difficult, because of the media. Sometimes the media try to portray something that is not big as big, and something that is not something that is big, they could miss something. And it's very difficult, and it might be not easy for a lay person to stay on top of immigration changes, immigration policy changes, or immigration law changes all the time. But that's what you always do until you are safe as a U.S. citizen. And even though when you are a U.S. citizen, there's still some laws that could impact you, that could affect you if the path that you become a U.S. citizen are not clear.
I think the last thought we'd like from you is, and this is, just an article that came across my iPad, and that the president had this thought that perhaps, we could bar U.S. citizens and permanent residents from entering the country if they are thought to have COVID-19 or actually have COVID-19. And to me, I kind of just read it and was like, it's probably another tweet or maybe just a thought. However, John did give me some facts and information in our U.S. history that it is possible. Your thoughts?
I really think that it's possible. When we put two things on the scale, one is the COVID and another is U.S. citizen. And you really need to say, from the point of view of the administration. You really need to save the country, and the country at large is more to be protected. So, but I think it is not going to be a blunt. You cannot come out. I'm sorry, you cannot come in. It's not going to be a blunt like that, but it will be some criteria and some exception to that. So to me, I think what should happen is that they can maybe have a state quarantine that is strictly enforced, and a certain area that these designated that you need to be quarantined in this area, which is very difficult. You know how people they like to be free and they like to make their own decision. So it's going to be difficult to implement, but it could happen.
It's anytime you have to call an attorney and have an attorney represent you, it's really because you want the attorney to tell you everything is going to be okay. I kind of feel like that's the last question for you. Is everything going to be okay, Tammy? Tell us, please, especially if you're, an immigrant or have been impacted by the immigration policy changes. And you do so great, in terms of informing the community of these policy changes, but your last words, if you should so kindly answer that question, is everything going to be okay?
This is very difficult. It's going to be difficult. The way that I practice law is that I do not sugarcoat my clients because it's for their own good, for their own benefit. I rather have a full information disclosed to them, explain to them, this is the alternative, this is their options, and if they choose this way, this is what's going to happen. If they choose the other way, this is going to happen. So the best advice for me is just to stay informed, educate yourself, find information, reliable source of information, verify the information that you receive, and stay informed, and then make an informed decision, so that it's best for your future. You don't want to make a mistake by deciding on something that is error right now, and then it could impact your future of immigration case in the future.
Do you have any last questions or thoughts, John?
No, I think that's a good time to wrap it up. Good response.
Yeah, that is great. Tammy, I want to thank you so much for being here with us on the program. I did have one last thing, though. I mean, I hope you're taking care of yourself. We need you. We need you to stick around. So what do you do to rest and to have fun? And
What do I do to rest? Well, I like gardening. The people who are my friends on Facebook will see I like cooking. I like gardening. Especially during this COVID, I don't get to go out that much because, my concern, I don't want to be exposed. I know how important it is to stay well and stay healthy. I need to be healthy so I can help other people. If I'm collapsing, then there will be a lot of people that got affected by this. So I like to garden. I like to see flowers, and I like to see the fruits in my garden of my work.
Do you watch Thai shows at all?
I used to. I don't have time to do that anymore. What is good now?
I was going to say that might add more stress to you, but maybe not. I don't know. I just finished a good one with Thai vampires, but that's for another show. Tammy, thank you so much for joining us here on the program and all the work that you do. And I'm sure of it. Your clients and the Thai community and the immigrant community absolutely appreciate your work as well.
Thank you for the opportunity. Thank you.
If you'd like to be in contact with Tammy or have a question for her about immigration, you can do so by looking her up, Tammy Sumonta. And we'll also, if you look through the program, you'll see on social media, she is incredibly active and has videos all the time when these changes happen. And thank you so much for joining us here for this very important program. We have more coming up. As John mentioned, there have been over 175 programs here that the Commonwealth Club has produced since COVID-19 has put us to this shelter in place or limitations in being face-to-face. We have an incredible program happening next week touching on mental health and youth. The kids are going back to school and coming out of being shelter in place for so long. So there's lots to talk about as we hope to create safe spaces for all of our community members. And so, John, you have the last word to end the program.
Well, add a quick plug there, and we've got a big program on Tuesday with Dr. Anthony Fauci.
Oh,
So, yes.
how can I forget?
You can find info on that, of course, at commonwealthclub.org. You can find all of future Michelle Meow shows at the club, as well as past ones at commonwealthclub.org/MMS. Thank you very much, everyone. Stay safe, stay healthy, and we'll see you in the future.